This is the Polar Grit X Pro, an even more rugged version of the Grit X released about a year and a half ago. Today, I'll be giving you a quick look at this new watch. First, let's take it for a run. 6.62 miles, 8 minutes, 47 seconds per mile, 139 beats per minute today, going for a run with the Polar Grit X Pro. An easy run with a couple of strides thrown in there. I'm in the taper now for the Chicago Marathon this week. Now, before I give you my thought on this watch after now my third run in it over the last 4 days, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a watch that was sent to me by Polar for the purpose of review, and I do have a beta version of the watch. I do think it's a near production version, but it is not a full production unit, just to make sure that you guys are aware of that. No one's paying me to make this video or to use this watch, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Polar Grit X Pro. Now, this is an update to the Polar Grit X, which is another watch that I tested and wore for quite a bit when it first came out a year and a half ago. The Polar Grit X is a watch that has all the multi-sport features that all of the Polar watches have, but it has a special emphasis on outdoor activities, specifically trail running and hiking. And to that end, it has a couple of different features from some of their other GPS running watches. So while it does have the GPS, it also has a compass that's not GPS dependent. It also has a barometric altimeter as well, so you can make sure that you're aware of what your altitude is, as well as for runners, you can also track your inclines and the declines of the terrain that you're running over. And it also, after the fact, lets you split up your data in terms of your run, not just in terms of like half mile or 1 mile increments to see those splits, but it can let you see splits for the hills that you've run, not only the inclines, but the declines as well. So if you're on hilly terrain, whether it's a road run or it's a dirt road run, or you're running trails and really getting a lot of vert, it can let you know like how you were doing pace-wise in each of those sections without you having to kind of like click your watch and manually lap time. You're also getting turn-by-turn navigation with integration with Commute. You're also getting kind of the back to start mapping and directions. So again, if someone gets lost easily in the woods, they can always have kind of that breadcrumb trail type of way of finding your way back. There's also structured workouts that are available in the Grit X Pro that you can send from creating those workouts either on your phone or on the laptop and then push those to the watch. And that's what I did for the workout for today, which was an easy run with just some strides put in there, 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off, times 8, just towards the end of the run. So that way I'm not having to like click manually every 15 seconds and kind of look for it and then click to make sure I'm getting the right distance. I can just kind of run fast until I hear the beep or until I feel the haptic vibration to let me know that that interval is over. So that's really helpful, especially for shorter intervals, like kind of like doing like a set of strides. Polar has updated the way that you can structure those workouts. So it used to be you could only do them by and set up like your zones, like whether you're doing like a fartlek or whether you're doing repeats, like mile repeats, kilometer repeats, or something even shorter. Like it used to be that you could only set them up by distance, or you could set them up by like pace and I think heart rate. Now you can also set them up by power as well. So there's wrist-based power that's available, or you have full compatibility with the Stride Foot Pod, which is what I use. And you could set the zones so that way when you're working, it tells you, all right, for the next mile or 6 minutes or whatever the interval may be, you need to be within this range of power. So you can set that up in the workouts too. And that's how I do a lot of my workouts. So I find that really helpful as well. And the other thing you're getting is the really great recovery metrics. You're getting the heart rate variability, the beat to beat interval, you're getting your sleep tracking, all those metrics that I look at every day, you're getting in the Polar Grit X Pro as well. And with the Grit X, Polar had it tested to a military standard 810G, I believe. That same standard applies for this watch. I don't have the exact numbers on battery life yet, but so far I've had the watch for 4 days. I think I had it at about 80% battery when I first got it, and I haven't had to put it on the charger yet, and the battery's still going strong for me, using it every day and just during my training as well. So all the same great features that you would come to expect from one of the more high-end watches from Polar are definitely in this watch as well. The main new feature though is in the glass. This year, the Polar Grit X Pro brings a sapphire as a glass, although I believe sapphire is technically considered a ceramic, but it's a very transparent and very strong material that is very resistant to scratches, that is going to fit very well in terms of the outdoor and rugged nature of the watch and the activities that it's intended to be used for. Also, as part of the new features of the Polar Grit X Pro is that there are a couple of new watch faces, or rather there's regular watch faces and then there's different menus that you can put as overlays on top of your watch face. The two that are specific to the Grit X Pro are a new sunrise and sunset indicator. So it tracks the sunrise and sunset times and puts it on the dial so you could see kind of like where in the day you are in relation to sunrise and sunset, which can be useful for people like me who like to film in either the beginning or the end of the day, so we can kind of plan our runs accordingly, or for people that are looking to make sure they are getting to certain locations before the sun goes down, or trying to plan when they need to be getting up for the sunrise so they can plan when to hit a summit or something like that. That's also something that's going to be really useful to be able to see right at a glance. The other new watch overlay that they have here that I also really like is that there is a compass with an altitude that's constantly listed on the front. So without having to dig into any menus, you can see instantly like kind of which way you're headed and what your altitude is. The other new feature that I noticed, which I found very useful right away in just the first time that I was running with it, is as I was getting to start my first activity, normally if you're pairing it with other sensors, I use external sensor of a foot pod and I use an external chest strap heart rate monitor. Sometimes it's a little hard to kind of like know if those sensors are communicating properly with the watch before you start the activity. There's different colors that they change to let you know that like the Bluetooth connections have been made, but I have a hard time seeing colors sometimes. And so for me, I've gotten pretty good at kind of figuring out whether the heart rate monitor is or isn't attached, or whether the foot pod is or isn't kind of like talking to the watch. But now there are like kind of extra indicators that really let you know that all the sensors are paired properly. Now, in addition to some of those new features, a lot of the features that were introduced on the Vantage V2, those have now moved over into the Grit series with the Grit X Pro. Diagnostic tests, which we first saw in the Vantage V2, are now pushed over to the Grit X Pro. And so there's that orthostatic test, which measures your heart rate variability. You put on a chest strap heart rate monitor. I believe the H9 and the H10 can both do that. You lay down, it takes a reading, and then you stand up and it takes a reading of your heart rate variability. And that gives you a sense of kind of like how recovered you are. You've also got the leg recovery test, which is basically you're doing some standing vertical jumps in series. And then based on that, it can do some sort of magic with the accelerometers in here and tell you how fresh your legs are. And you also have a VO2 max simulation test where basically you're running to failure. You start at a certain pace, and then every certain amount of seconds, it increases the pace faster and faster, and it tracks your heart rate the entire time. So it can give you an estimation of what your VO2 max is. So all those tests, I don't think were available on the Grit X. Those are going to be available on the Grit X Pro. Now, this Polar Grit X Pro is part of a larger kind of like product release. And so the Polar Grit X Pro is coming out, I believe, today or later today, depending on when this video goes up on YouTube. So that'll be available for purchase today. There's going to be 3 colors. There's a black color, which is the one I have. There's a copper, and then there is a gold one, I believe, which has, I think, the white band. And then there's also going to be an even more premium edition, the Polar Grit X Pro Titan, and that one is going to have a titanium case, which is going to make the entire watch 12% lighter, which I do think is going to be important because this is a really big watch. It's definitely a much heavier watch than the Vantage V2 that I typically run in. It's noticeable when you first put it on, but after like your first run, within like 5 minutes, you kind of don't really notice it all that much anymore, but it is a much heavier watch, so having that titanium could definitely bring the weight down quite a bit. So then you're getting titanium in the case and then sapphire on the glass. It's a nice, super rugged and high-end combination there. But the Grit X isn't the only thing getting an update. The Vantage V2 is going to get some updates as well, which is new from Polar. Polar, I don't think it really has been doing a lot of kind of like pushing updates down to previous generations of watches, but it looks like they are going to do at least some of that here. So some of those new watch overlays that I was talking about in terms of the sunrise, sunset, and then the compass and navigation one, I believe those are going to soon, I don't think today, but soon are going to get pushed as updates to the Vantage V2. So that's some new stuff that's going to happen there. I'm not sure if the new kind of like Bluetooth indicators that will tell you if your heart rate monitor or your foot pod are connected to the watch before the activity. I don't know if that's getting pushed over either. Once that update comes out, I'll update you guys on whether that gets pushed to the Polar Vantage V2. Also with the V2, they're getting a couple of new flavors of the V2 that are going to be coming out as well. 2 new flavors of V2 that are called the V2 Shift. There's going to be one in black and then one in teal. And then also they're updating the Unite line. So there's going to be, I think, 2 new colors of the Unite. So a lot of updates coming from Polar. Once the Chicago Marathon's over this weekend, I'll definitely be putting this through a lot more paces. And by paces, I mean some terrain that's a little bit more appropriate for something like the Grit X Pro. I'm going to be getting on some more trails, going on some more adventures. So that's all coming up, and I'll be able to really test some of the features, getting lost in the woods, which is not that hard for me to do. So definitely able to test a lot of those features using the compass, all of those things, seeing how it does, and really putting it through a proper test. But I wanted to make sure that since this watch was coming out today, that you guys at least had some information in terms of what this is, so that way you can keep an eye out for it in case it's something that you're looking to make a purchase soon. But if you want to see more of the testing as it becomes available, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can know when those videos go up on YouTube. If you have any questions about the Grit X Pro, feel free to put them in the comments down below, or better yet, feel free to stop by the live stream they do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I would love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?